Ladies and gentlemen, of course, we're all probably suffering from a lack of sleep. I've been up since 2 a.m. this morning. I think it's great that Fiji is now into the semi-finals, and we wish our team all the best. I think on that very positive note, the fact that we beat New Zealand too is of course a great thing too. Sorry, CEO Tower Insurance. But ladies and gentlemen, look, I'd like to have more of a discussion rather than some form of speech. And I think there are a number of issues obviously that face the insurance industry in Fiji vis-a-vis the consumers in Fiji. But what I'd like to just overall highlight from a government's perspective, what are the key priorities and some of the key issues that face us as a country, as an economy. As the CEO of Consumer Council highlighted, we obviously had a very catastrophic cyclone. It did some very funny things. It came from the northeast of the country as opposed to the northwest, traditionally where it comes from. It lingered around. It did roundabout turns. What it actually demonstrates is that the nature of climatic conditions and catastrophes arising from that is going to change quite significantly. We have, of course, rising sea levels. We have droughts that are bearing upon us. But it's not all gloom and doom. I mean, human society has shown us that whenever massive changes have taken place because of nature's changing patterns, it does not necessarily mean it's a gloom and doom situation. Your ability to manage that is the test of how best the society is able to survive any changes through climatic conditions. So what our real, I suppose, discussion should be as a country, of course, indeed as a planet Earth, is how best do we deal with it? How best do we adapt? Not just in terms of our living conditions, in terms of how we grow our crops, when do we grow our crops, how do we build our buildings, but also how best we are able to manage our financial institutions around it. Government, of course, for example, has changed its financial year. One of the key reasons being is that we had the budget being delivered smack in the middle, in the beginning of the budget, smack in the middle of the cyclone season, and then you could have the cyclone season within a couple of months after the budget being delivered, completely destroying your budget. So the idea of changing the financial year is to be able to have your budget delivered not in a cyclone period, and at least you have about a 3 or 4 month buffer before you actually get into the cyclone period. And that's what we call adaptation. It's adaptation to climate changes. So that's a financial adaptation. Similarly, we think that as a country, vis-a-vis the insurance industry, we need to be able to look at how the insurance industry needs to adapt itself to the challenges that we will face as a country, and indeed the opportunities that arise as a country if we are able to look at things afresh, anew. Now, government is very, very keen, and I'm sure as the acting CEO of Housing Authority will tell you in the session, and we had a meeting with the board yesterday, and as we've said in many other occasions, the rate of home ownership in Fiji is extremely low. We had a good meeting, I believe, with the Association of Banks last week. They on their own volition came and had a meeting with us, and we hope to have regular meetings with them too. We don't have such an arrangement with the Insurance Council, but we hope that it will develop after this, where we discussed how government is very much focused on increasing the rate of home ownership, very low rates. A country like Singapore has a home rate ownership of about 93%, where the superannuation fund, the equivalent of FNPF, and the banks and the government and the Housing Development Board have a very focused attention in terms of how to increase the rate of home ownership and also to provide the finance around it. Of course, the insurance company play a very pivotal role in all of this. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to say is that government has a focus on home ownership, increasing home ownership. It cannot obviously happen without it being financed for individual homeowners to actually buy those homes, so the banks come into play. Obviously the banks will want insurance, so we cannot have a good play in it if the insurance companies don't play their part also. So I think if we have a government that's focused on increasing the rate of home ownership, and we have had some preliminary discussions with RBF, and we hope to further those discussions in quarantining some funds at low interest rates. So we have some very good opportunities. Similarly, I'm saying that there's an opportunity for insurance companies to be able to come to the party in respect of this particular focus. Now, leaving that aside, the other issue is that, of course, as the CEO highlighted, is that there are two categories of people in Fiji. One group, of course, are those people who are insured, who probably can afford insurance, and who probably, when I say afford insurance, they can afford the very onerous provisions that have been set by insurance companies to be able to meet the engineer's certification, to be able to get property insurance in the first place. That's one category of people. The other category of people, of course, are those people who we've seen, who we've just recently disbursed $88 billion to. And these are uninsured people in Fiji who were affected by the cyclone. We have something like 225 schools that were damaged. We have 44 lives that were lost. We have estimated about 32 to 40,000 people whose homes were either completely damaged or substantially damaged or partially damaged. These are the categories of people who obviously fall into this basket of people who do not have any support through any form of insurance cover. Now, that is a very important issue for us, because governments cannot year in, year out simply keep on giving out that amount of money without government itself, or the private sector itself, or the homeowners themselves having access to some form of insurance. And I think it is unfortunate that the insurance companies have not been proactive in coming up with products that could suit our socioeconomic circumstances that may exist, say, outside the metropolitan cities in Fiji, outside, your Subas, your Lotokas, Nandis, and what have you. Of course, flood cover is another issue where insurance companies, I think, can improve their game in Nandi and Ba. But that's another point of discussion. So there is an opportunity there for the insurance companies, together with the government, playing a role in terms of furthering cover to these people, but you could cap it. You could have a reduced standard, but not necessarily a reduced standard that is going to be devastating for the insurance companies, but some standard that will meet at least certain categories of cyclones. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And what I'm going to suggest is that, we don't want this gathering to be a bashing session for insurance companies. The idea is to come up with some good solutions on the way forward as to what we can do and how insurance companies can play a role in terms of furthering cover in areas where absolutely there's absence of insurance. The issue regarding of non-disclosure, etc., I think is obviously for those people who can afford insurance, but who may not necessarily have the ability to have all the information given to them. In Fiji, unfortunately, and I think these are legacy issues, many governments have not addressed consumer protection, consumer information, or advocacy regarding consumer rights in a tangible manner. We've simply left it to the courts. And it's a very laborious process. There are many lawyers, of course, in Fiji who specialize in acting for insurance companies. They're also very, very good experts in getting wonderful adjournment delays, because that what it does, it strings out many of the individual consumers who do not necessarily have the resources to be able to fight these cases. And I think that is a fundamental issue. Some countries, of course, have dealt with it by setting up independent tribunals that deal up to certain amounts in claims. Others, of course, have simply left it to the precedent value that may be created through the common law. And if you look at the current Insurance Act, notwithstanding the fact that you have the RBF, giving out guidelines, the law itself is very, very rudimentary. It's fundamentally focused on the prudential requirements of insurance companies. And even some of the amendments that are being proposed by the RBF, again focuses fundamentally on prudential requirements. There is, in fact, there's a dearth of provisions in respect of consumer rights, consumer protection, in terms of specific provisions regarding disclosures. So I think there's obviously room for improvement there. So that I think is another category that can be dealt with by this forum as to how that can be improved. Of course, I've sort of pulled out, this reason I've got all these papers with me. You have the Fair Insurance Code in New Zealand, 2016. You also have the Insurance Council of Australia that has a general insurance code of practice. I do not see that in Fiji. That has not been developed in Fiji. I stand to be corrected, but I don't think there is such a guideline that exists in Fiji. And let me just sort of read out, just by way of information. This is very basic stuff. You have in the insurance one, in the New Zealand Insurance Council of New Zealand, when a catastrophe disaster strikes, we may receive a large number of claims, and we may be especially reliant on third parties. This means we may not be able to meet the time frame set by this code. However, when a catastrophe or disaster strikes, we will, 1, use our best efforts to meet all the commitments in this code, 2, respond as quickly as possible in a professional, practical, and compassionate manner, which is what most insurance companies are seen to be perceived to be lacking in Fiji. 3, update you at least once every 20 business days, or another such interval as we may agree with you until your claim is resolved, and prioritize our service for our most vulnerable customers. Now, this is actually quite good in the whole scheme of things, because it does set some time frames. And at the moment, there does not seem to be any sort of specific agreed social contract between the insured and the insurer regarding time frames. And in particular, you have this provisions regarding catastrophes and disasters. Now, this is actually, I think, quite good. And of course, it has a complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction made to us related to our products or services, or the complaints handling process itself, where a response or resolution is implicitly expected. Any complaint you will make will be referred to an internal dispute resolution process. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we are developing one ourselves within government regarding complaints of our Ministry of Health. As was announced in the budget, we are doing one where you'll be able to, for example, call a telephone number, because we get complaints ranging from the doctor is not giving me the right information, or the orderly is not letting my family visit my father but allowing other people to visit, or the doctor has put the wrong catheter up my young child. It ranges from a whole range of issues. So we are actually putting in place a mechanism through which these complaints can be addressed. In fact, in the budget we've allocated $250,000 for this. So that will be rolled out very soon. So government obviously recognizes also that there are in certain areas of operations that are very dear to people. It's a very human issue, where people need to feel that there is some form of very transparent mechanism in which they can make complaints, in which it will be dealt with in a professional manner, in which that they will be dealt with dignity. And I think fundamentally that's what's happening. And in Fiji, of course, more and more people are getting educated, more and more people have exposure to services that their relatives may be enjoying in Australia and New Zealand, and they will say to them when they come and visit Fiji, how come you guys don't enjoy this? Tower Insurance or Queensland Insurance is in Australia, is in New Zealand, they do X, Y, Z, but they don't do it in Fiji. This is the discourse, this is the speak, and I think we need to be able to address these issues. Again, I think I'd like to highlight the fact that in the USA, they have, and I pulled this out thanks to my staff, they've got a national flood insurance program where they essentially are targeting areas that are prone to flood in USA. And they have actually a community-driven project in terms of how you can, firstly, there's a requirement on that particular community to work together to mitigate the risks of flood. So they may, for example, be committed to ensuring that all the drains are clean, they do not have backwash coming up, through the flooding and the rivers and what have you. So there's a community-driven project. I mean, these things can be very easily done. And we in Fiji are, community-driven too. So if we, for example, say that in the area of tavua, which may be, say, prone to flooding. We can offer you insurance protection, but a cap is X, Y, Z, but on the condition that you will make sure that your drains are always cleaned and all of that. People actually get into that. And in fact, you can actually have a very good PR-driven project regarding this. The Reserve Bank of Fiji recently came to us and said that some insurance companies had got together and were offering I think insurance cover up to $5,000. $1,000 for medical treatment, $2,000, etc. for that. We actually rejected it because the insurance companies wanted, I think, carry forward of losses from that and tax write-offs, whatever. Because I think we already have a very good corporate environment. You pay tax rates of only 20%. You have a very good business environment. So these are the kind of things that you can also, in fact, don't necessarily have to go off and get a separate package of tax incentives. But the fact is that you're able to participate with all the stakeholders. If we're able to have this forum develop certain products that may, set a way forward. You have the engineers here, some very credible engineers, people who've been here within the system, and they may be able to offer some solutions that may be able to, offer products that currently is not offered. So, ladies and gentlemen, without sort of saying too much, these are some of the areas that I did want to highlight. I want to use an example. I know Malaka is here. I did work, I worked many years ago in a former life. I also worked as an insurance agent. I was a broker and I did a lot of marine hull insurance, but I also did property insurance. I also did work as a legal counsel for an insurance company, which is now BSP, used to be known as Colonial. And I remember talking, there was one particular claim, it's to do with life insurance, but I think it is perhaps indicative of many of the claim rooms in many insurance companies, and hopefully things have changed since then, is that there's a gentleman who filled out his life insurance proposal, and in that, you get a question asked, do you go parachuting? And he said no, parachuting / parasailing. And they said no. He said no, which he didn't. He was in fact a sports activities person on the Fijian resort. His job was to help people play volleyball and keep an eye out on the swimming pool, etc. One day, one of his workers did not turn up to work, who normally does the parasailing thing, whether you have the parachute and the boat takes off and you sort of go off on that. I think it's called parasailing. And so he was in fact just asked by his supervisor to put on the chute and show the tourists how it's done. He had not done it before. Anyway, he did try to do it, and he put it on, but the boat took off. The boat took off, he panicked, and he unlocked it, and he fell down and he died. He fell from a particular height and he died. Now, the claims person, and I got a letter later on saying that the claim was being refused by the family, by the insurance company refusing it, because he did not tick the box saying that he did parasailing and parachuting or whatever. Now, the fact of the matter is that he did not do it. The fact of the matter is that is a one-off peculiar set of circumstances that led to his death. Now, we eventually actually paid the claim because the position of the insurance company was that he had not fully disclosed all his, activities, day-to-day activities. So the philosophy, the claim office philosophy was, how best do we not pay? As opposed to saying, these are the boxes that we must tick. Have they done X, Y, Z? Tick, 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 tick. Claim is paid. If the boxes, one of the boxes aren't ticked, then okay, the claim may not be paid, or we need to make further inquiries. So I think again, if we have at that level too, we have some internal processes that should be known by the consumer, by the person buying the insurance. There may be certain things that they may not need to know, but I think at least if the most apparent determinants of ensuring whether you will get paid or not is disclosed, that level of disclosure, of course, will give a lot of confidence. And my point is that the idea is not to, to suck the insurance company dry of money and get them to pay what they're not supposed to pay. That's not the idea. I think the idea is that at the moment there's a general sense, general belief that there is lack of disclosure, there's lack of information. So how do we fix the problem? That's one category. The second category is, of course, where we don't have insurance, and how do we extend insurance to those areas. And I think it is also very important for the Consumer Council to understand from the insurance companies themselves their challenges. It is also very important for the insurance companies to also understand from the engineers as to what basic things can be done that may actually provide maybe a $3,000 or $5,000 cover for somebody's roof in a rural area if they meet various conditions that may not necessarily be the same as a fully fledged insurance cover requirement that may exist in Suva. So these are some of the issues that I want to put on the floor. I hope that your deliberations will go well. We look forward to a positive outcome in this meeting. As I said, the idea is not to bash each other up. The idea is to ensure that we have as many free-flowing thoughts as possible, to be able to find a more positive solution to some of the areas there may be some stumbling blocks. I can overall say, ladies and gentlemen, that the Fijian economy, notwithstanding the fact that we've had a massive cyclone, is doing relatively well. We were on a trajectory of unprecedented growth rates. Growth rates again will be for 7 years in a row. There's a number of projects on foot. There's a huge rebuild program. We have allocated $205 million in the rebuild program. About $130 to $135 million is actually going into the rebuild of the schools. Tenders are being called in clusters, and most of the tenders should be out, and in fact projects should commence by November of this year. And in fact some of them will go out to tender. In fact tenders will be awarded by the end of this month too. So a number of things are happening. As you can also see that on the commercial front, there's a number of buildings, there's a number of factories. You've got AFL, you've got MOMI, you've got a number of challenges in respect of a shortage of skill sets within the Fijian market. We've had a couple of construction companies, as I said to the ABIF, that a number of construction companies are actually bringing in workers from Indonesia and Philippines to address the skill shortages, but to get the projects completed on time. So overall, there's general robustness within the economy, and we obviously are looking at ways as to how to increase and maintain that robustness in a sustainable manner. And in order for us to do that, we need to be able to get all the players to play their very pivotal role. I mean, of course, the builders are here too. We need to introduce some form of credible mechanism in terms of recognizing certified builders. We don't necessarily have that in a very transparent manner. It'd be good to get the builders on board with that. You can then, if that feeds into the fact that insurance companies will have confidence in the people who put up the buildings, and overall it is a win-win situation for all. So I wish you all the best in your deliberations this morning, and we of course as government look forward to some positive outcomes, and of course a lot more positive engagement with all the stakeholders. Naka, thank you.